I would like to know from you, Maren, as a project implementer, that you also, what you told us, you also guide organizations and businesses in the change process towards mainstreaming GESI, as well as partner organizations. Can you please specify how you measure and monitor change and impact during this organizational change process? You might also want to briefly introduce your organization, what you are doing in terms of gender equality and social inclusion.
Yeah, no, many thanks, Sandra, and thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to share some of our learnings. So GFA is a consulting company. We work in various technical fields, including technical and vocational training, employment, and skills development. I'm part of that department. And I would like, first differentiate a bit, because we do have our in-house processes. So actually we have reactivated our technical working group on gender and diversity. It was inspired by the launch of the feminist development policy. So it was a bit of a kick to get back into that discussion as well on a company level. And we have also initiated a sort of working group on department level. So within the education, skills and employment department to see where we stand in terms of gender and diversity. So when I speak about our in-house processes, so it's really around mainstreaming gender and diversity to all our processes, including recruitment, including sort of project design and implementation, but also having it into our own project management and safeguarding processes. When I talk about project level, we fully depend on our clients. We implement projects for GIZ, for KfW, for SDC, for SECO, for the EU. And often the indicators and the project design is very clearly prescripted by the clients already in the tender process. Nevertheless, within our department level, we have started a process to assess where we stand as a team with our project. We have done a questionnaire on our ongoing projects, and we have assessed 15 of the projects, of which most of them are from GIZ, 12 are GIZ, and one is KfW, one is SECO, and one is SDC. And we have asked several questions to our project coordinators. So, for example, around indicators, we have seen all of those projects had indicators that were disaggregated by sex. But those that had very sort of thematic indicators on gender equality had only been 4 out of those 15 projects. And those were around questions of, are TVET measures adapted for women needs? How is the women rate of past final exams? What are information measures adapted to women needs? How is the increase of women's income? So we see the indicators are basically all our projects have the sex aggregation, but sort of going a bit deeper, there are only 25% of our ongoing projects. Another question was around gender expertise on our team level. We have in 3 projects, there is a gender expert that is financed by our client. So these are often short-term experts, but we do have projects with a very specific request for gender experts. And we have in 5 of the 15 projects, we have at least a team member who is in charge of integrating the gender perspective. Then also sort of referring to the point that Birte shared around the new agents. We also wanted to know what are the type of organizations that we are partnering with, specifically from local society, local civil society, as those could be new partners in order to implement gender transformative approaches. We have seen that more than half of our projects are working with different local civil society organizations, but only one of that local organization has a specific focus on gender and diversity. So there is still room for improvement. We have gone a bit deeper to understand the different type of partners. So we do have, of course, the TVET schools and the TVET centers that are an important partner, and a different type of short-term experts. But we also have seen that private business is a large scale of partners. So half of the project, of course, work with them. but also partners such as women cooperatives, especially in the area of agricultural business, but also universities, NGOs, private foundations. And we have also sort of identified that as a sort of an area where we need to consult further. So now based on this questionnaire and the results, we are sort of setting up guidelines for our projects and for our team leaders and how to better mainstream gender transformative approaches into these projects, specifically if that is not yet included into the project design. So that we find ways in order to include these components or strengthen those components, although it's not yet in the project design.
I have one more question for Maren, basically because she referred to a project called ATVET, which is an African-based TVET project, which is across certain countries, which has explicitly addressed a transformative approach in its TVET and entrepreneurship approach, where GFA has been asked to do an impact study. Maybe Maren, you could just share a little bit your experience and what you've actually addressed there to measure transformation, the impact from a transformation point of view. Thank you, Maren.
Yeah, many thanks. So it's the ATVET for Women project. It had been a large-scale GIZ project funded by BMZ, but also in cooperation with the African Union Development Partnership. And it supports women in different types of agribusinesses, had been implemented in several African countries. And it's not only sort of access to training and sort of setting up employment opportunities in agriculture, but also it really had a transformative approach. I think it was at that time the only GG2 project within skill development and agriculture, so quite a lighthouse project in that regard. And we had, for example, we have implemented a training course that was called Gender Makes Business. So really sort of including gender perspectives into the entrepreneurship and the business trainings. And that had a lot of different aspects. So there was a lot of work on community level, specifically also with male members of the community, but also with the women. Different type of sort of identifying different gender stereotypes, how those could also be barriers to successful business, and also like all those questions around who holds, who has the sort of the funds within the family, who makes decision around how funding are spent, who makes decision in family-run businesses. So I mean, quite a comprehensive and holistic project design, and we were asked to demonstrate and to measure that impact. So what we had to do is we had to do additional studies to do so. No, it couldn't be captured with the existing monitoring framework, but we had been asked to do a sort of a baseline study and an endline study, and we have used a specific indicator. It's called Women Empowerment in Agriculture Index that had been developed by the International Food and Policy Research Institute. And that was an index that gave sort of the blueprint in order to measure and to identify what do we mean by women empowerment and what are the different sections that needs to be analyzed. So here, for example, we could see that attitudes about intimate partner violence against women have decreases in several countries that had been targeted. We could see that control over use of income in one country, for example, has catched up with other countries. We could see that the question around work balance inequality has decreases in several countries. So I think that is I could go more into depth, and the study is available, of course, but I think that is an interesting sort of blueprint that had been set up to measure changes around power relations, which is required for structural change. Maybe also just to that is one project, ATVET. I wanted to mention like very shortly two other projects because I also want to speak not about failure, but about a project where we have room for improvement. It was also a project funded by GIZ in Bangladesh with communities affected by migration due to climate change. that was a project where the number should have been 40% women that should have been reached. At the end, we have reached 70%, so sort of more 30% more than expected. And that was due to the fact that most of the community were female-led households. So it was basically a women project, but the design of the project hasn't been gender sensitive. So when the project had been set up, sort of the request to provide training and to provide income and employment opportunities has been not designed with gender lenses. So what we have seen, for example, is women were more interested in flexible working arrangement, that what they could do from home. So they wouldn't select those training courses that were long-term training courses, but maybe those with short-term skill training and then an opportunity to work from home. But one example was that those they would need, for example, a starter kit to start with. So, for example, sewing machines. But those starter kits were only foreseen for those who have done the entrepreneurial training and not those that have done a longer training on a certain skill. And that was a budget decision that was taken before, and that couldn't be changed. And those were the things. If we would have known from the beginning that our biggest group are women, we would have done more consultations in the beginning, would have asked them what were their perspective, what were their needs, what are their care duties that they have to accommodate, and then design the interventions along those needs. Another aspect was, for example, that there were training courses offered, a 6-month training course in company, for example, in the leather company, which would guarantee a full-time employment afterwards. A lot of women signed up for those courses, but they drop off because they didn't want to work evening shifts. And they weren't consulted in the beginning. They would have said that they wouldn't do evening shifts because there's no safe transport after the end. So those are the things, I think, very practical one where we have said, okay, after having done this training, after knowing that women had been the largest target group, we would have designed the intervention differently to make sure that we would not only reach the numbers, but also would have made a qualitative, a bigger change for those women.